the Super Bowl is coming up, and it just raises the question, why does the NFL keep picking the artists that they are? Like, I don't have anything personally against Bad Bunny, and I think it is great that we are getting a variety of musicians to perform at the halftime show. But for me personally, being more of a rock and country fan, I would rather see some of those artists perform. I'm not saying that the Turning Point USA halftime show is the answer, and I don't personally have anything against Bad Bunny. I'm just not a fan of his music, and that is okay because art is subjective and we can all have our own personal preferences, and a lot of people don't like what I like, and that's okay. And we're here to have an open and honest conversation about that. And I guess my biggest thing with him is, again, not a personal attack at Bad Bunny. This is more against the NFL, because here we have another Super Bowl in the Bay Area. I think this is the second time that Levi's Stadium has hosted it, and that is in Santa Clara, part of the Bay Area, home of the 49ers. And a huge band from San Francisco, obviously Bay Area. A huge band from the Bay Area is Metallica, hence why I'm wearing the shirt. And what is it going to take for the NFL to include them to perform at the halftime show? What do they need to do? I mean, they've sold, countless albums, performed to countless amounts of people. People have been, so moved by their music around the globe. And this is music that will last forever. Super Bowl 50, they got gypped, and then they did like the night before concert at AT&T Park just to be kind of like a screw you to the NFL because they didn't get the chance to do the halftime show. They were really, thinking they might get the chance to. I mean, they could at any time, honestly, but it would be the most fitting for them to perform, kind of more of a hometown show, hometown Super Bowl. So I just don't know what it's going to take for the NFL to give them a chance. I mean, they are a great band, and they're not the only one that's being left out of the equation. I think other great, Super Bowl halftime show headliners would be, Guns N' Roses for sure, but even more so, I would say Foo Fighters, because they can really still tear it up. Because Guns N' Roses, is not what they once were live. Foo Fighters can still really, really bring it, and maybe they don't have as many anthems that play during NFL games, but you know, once Dave Grohl hits that first chord of Everlong, it's done. I mean, and I'm sure there's got to be different chants of like, chants during games of like, My Hero and different things like that. But the other big name that I think of for bands being left out right off the top of my head is AC/DC. I mean, you cannot go to an NFL game without hearing, Hell's Bells, even just like that, the bells tolling, or Thunderstruck, or Shoot to Thrill, or countless hits of theirs. And why they aren't being, considered as a halftime show performer, I don't get it. I know they're old, and maybe I'm just, repping the dad rock kind of aesthetic here, but good music is good music to my ears. And that being said, I do like more than just rock. As I said, I do like, quite a variety of music. Again, personally not a Bad Bunny fan, don't have anything against the guy. I'm just not a fan of his music. And I realize not every halftime show is going to be for me, because even another example of this, like when Rihanna did the Super Bowl halftime show, I was not really a big fan of it. And I like a lot of her music, but there was just really not a lot happening besides like the, kind of screens that were raised and lowered as like lift kind of things. So I didn't really care for that. Or I also didn't really care for J-Lo and Shakira's halftime show. And that kind of reminds me of like the Bad Bunny thing with him being, Spanish speaking. I'm not saying that there's not a place for that. And I think that it is great, on one side of the coin, that we have representation of, of all different types of artists. I'm just saying, for me personally, it doesn't do anything for me because I don't speak Spanish, so it does not correlate. It's not me trying to be ignorant. It's just like I don't really listen to a lot of other music that is, in a different language. That's all it is. I realize the guy is talented and he has a lot of fans clearly, and has a big enough pull that the NFL would have him be an entertainer at the halftime show. But that being said, there was one band that I did leave out, and that I'm glad is at least part of the opening ceremony, and I'm really glad to see that Green Day is a part of this. They really should honestly headline the halftime show themselves. I think they're just part of the more opening ceremony, or kind of like the kickoff of it pregame. I think that's their kind of role in it, but I'm still glad that they're included. And even if they weren't a Bay Area band, they should be there anyway. But as I was saying before, is, there are other, types of music that I do like, and, artists that I would like to see perform. Like, I think Morgan Wallen halftime show would be great. I think Post Malone would be great. But really, the big one that I see happening within the next, few years would be a Taylor Swift halftime show. I'm sure it's only been a matter of time. And, I'm sure if it doesn't conflict with a, crazy touring schedule like she previously was on, she probably will do it. I'm sure she's just kind of taking some time to chill for herself because, all that she has going on, and who knows, what else she has going on behind the scenes. I'm sure she's, making new music as we speak, and, has a million other projects going on. Yeah, those are just some other performers I think would be great. Again, too, I know I always come off as like the rock guy, but there have been other performances that I really liked. Like Katy Perry's, honestly, is probably my number one of all time. I think that was the best. I really did like Lady Gaga's as well. I thought Bruno Mars was great. Him and the Red Hot Chili Peppers were really cool together, and he did that drum solo before that. And then the Chili Peppers came out as a surprise guest. Paul McCartney was awesome. I really like the Who. And backtracking the Bruno Mars and Red Hot Chili Peppers thing, it is so neat to see the different blends of musicians like that you'd not expect to see together. Honestly, before that, I didn't know that Bruno Mars was kind of a sort of a multi-instrumentalist. Maybe I'm misrepresenting him in that fact, but I did not know that he played drums. I figured maybe that he sang, and then I thought he played a little bit of piano and probably some guitar too. Don't quote me on that, but I thought it was just fun. You don't see drum solos at the Super Bowl halftime show, so I thought that was unique. Or even like when you talk about, blending stuff together, look all the way back at, Aerosmith and NSYNC and Britney Spears, like, all those people together. I think it makes it fun that way. Some things kind of gel together better than others, for types of artists, but sometimes, opposites do attract, and things can kind of work together in this kind of strange concoction we have going on of a, halftime show. That Coldplay hasn't done the halftime show as far as I remember. And another artist too that I wasn't necessarily, that big of a fan of was The Weeknd. I knew a few of his songs beforehand, but I thought his, show was really cool. The setup that he did, and that he did stuff, I think, kind of like on the pirate ship, and that it was more like a practical like setup and whatever, and not just like him standing on, in front of a screen or something kind of boring. But I thought that was cool. A lot of people hate on it. I really liked the Black Eyed Peas halftime show. I think that was also the last time the Packers were in the Super Bowl, and they won that against the Steelers. I believe that was the same year. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people hate on, Black Eyed Peas at Fergie and stuff, and for being cheesy in their performance, but I personally liked it, and it spoke to me. But, again, that's what's cool is that, there's something, there are different things that different people like, and that was one of them to me that spoke to me like that. Even speaking of a variety of artists, that I think it was either in 2022 or 2023, the last Super Bowl in LA at SoFi. Well, I guess it was the first time SoFi hosted it. I really enjoyed that halftime show. It was really cool because I do like a lot of that. I like a fair amount of that like LA rap, kind of like the guys out of Compton, like they had, Dr. Dre there, and then, Eminem, and then, 50 Cent's part. And then I think, a couple of others. Anyway, I thought that was a really cool mashup. And I'm not the biggest rap guy in the world, but like pretty much I knew almost all of those, songs. Cause again, too, for a Super Bowl halftime performance, it's kind of just the hits. But anyway, I thought that was really good too. So this is just to show that I do like a variety of artists and a variety of music. Maybe I fall into more of a basic kind of, white guy rock and roll and country stuff, but I come by that honestly, and maybe Bad Bunny will surprise me. I'm not 100% sure if I will, check out his show or not, once it's posted on YouTube. I don't know if I'll watch it like at the time, of the game, but, I don't know. I guess it's worth giving a shot too. What are your thoughts about this year's Super Bowl halftime show performer? And do you like Bad Bunny, or who would you like to see instead? Let me know your thoughts down below. February 27th is going to be a really busy day. And you know why? Because there are a couple of major releases. And this is just a great example of how much of a variety of subjects get covered in this show. They are so different from each other, but I enjoy them a lot, and I'm really anticipating each of them. And the first one is Man on the Run, a new documentary that's going to be released on Prime Video on Friday, February 27th. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm a huge Paul McCartney fan. I like the Beatles a lot too. I probably actually, listen to, Paul McCartney's solo stuff and Wings more than the Beatles, really. Honestly, I know that might be kind of a hot take, but for their, for the run they had, which was also kind of brief, they made a lot of great material. And I, thought it was so cool just seeing footage from back in the day, like from, the concert movie Rock Show, you know, and them playing just classics like, Band on the Run or Jet Live. And it was really cool to see Linda McCartney, Paul's late wife, playing keyboards alongside of him. I don't think she really knew any instruments or had any musical training before that. And, obviously with, her being his wife, that I think kind of took her under his wing and taught her. And it was like, no, you can, be a songwriter and be a great musician too. Anybody can. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I felt like Denny Lane was pretty talented too. Paul McCartney, Linda McCartney, and Denny Lane. I think the new documentary focuses a lot like right after the Beatles broke up and when he went solo and making his first, record on his own by himself. And I thought it was so cool that he, kind of, workshopped that all and produced it and, self-produced it and wrote it and played all the instruments on it, to make McCartney 1. And, I think there's only maybe like a song or two that I like on there, but just the overall process and just the idea of it is just still amazes me that he did that and just, kind of homesteading on their farm in Scotland for years and him, writing just banger music. So I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, so if you're a Beatles fan, if you're a Paul McCartney fan, make sure to check out Man on the Run when it drops on Prime Video. As I mentioned before, with February 27th being a very busy day for me content wise, new movies coming out. The other movie that I've not mentioned yet and that I'm very hyped for, and I know many horror fans are, maybe it's a little divisive now of how things have been going. Scream 7. Scream 7 drops on February 27th, and I am pumped for it. I felt like Scream 6 was a little bit of a drop off from where we were with Scream 5, but I've still really enjoyed this series of movies a lot. I think they're very well written and they really make you think. And I thought it was, so fun to be, outside of the box and, be fourth wall breaking, even when times themselves, they, kind of go back on the rules they make or like just kind of ignore and it just happens anyway. Like, why is it always like when somebody's chasing you, in a mask with a knife that's chasing you, you don't run out the door, you run up the stairs. And then they do that like, 30 seconds later. Cause it's like one of those things to where it's like, if you were in the, heat of the moment and you're not always thinking clearly and your adrenaline's rushing, you probably would do the same thing. I probably would too. So that being said, just, makes me wonder exactly where we are with Scream because there's been so many things happening and it's been discussed so much in the last couple of years between, movies coming out. And it was like, I think script changes or, something got leaked and whatever, possibly again. I don't know for sure. But, and then it was like the huge things that happened were, Melissa Barrera being let go. And that was just over some kind of BS, and that was stupid. I'm not going to, get into that further. And then, Jenna Ortega kind of got pissed about that and she left too. And they're both very talented actresses. So it really sucks that Scream lost both of them because I really liked where their story was going, with them being sisters and stuff. And I thought they, played really great roles, especially like I said in Scream 5. They really impressed me a lot because, they really are the best of like the newer characters in my opinion. So I'm just, curious of all how this is going to work because it's, or if, people might almost boycott this movie because with those two not being involved and other things that went down. And then there's talks of, Matthew Lillard being back as Stu. And then it's like you got Sydney back again, but it's like, how many times is she going to come back? It's like, is she ever just going to learn just to be like to, ignore this stuff? And then there's, things with like, there's the blue skirt, like there was like the blue flannel, and then it's like just because that's like what previous, killers have worn. It's just, it makes me almost think like that's got to be like a red herring though, because they got to know it's so odd, obvious at this point. But, I'll be there most likely opening weekend to catch it because, I'm a fan. And, to be honest, it's funny that, I call myself a Scream fan and I am. And it is very interesting, like the layers to it and the lore. And there's so many things that maybe this thing means this, or like, oh, maybe this person's actually coming back, or they actually didn't die, or like, when they brought Kirby back. And there's so many layers and complexities to this. But I think that also just means it's such a good product overall. And even when people like myself, like I'd agree that, Scream 3 is the weakest of the franchise, when that's your worst, you still have a very solid franchise overall. So, um, yeah. So that being said, like, I am a fan of Scream, but I've actually only seen all the movies one time through, and I think I might have caught like an episode or two of the TV series. The same friend who I, talked to about Stranger Things a lot, he watched the Scream TV series, and I should have when that was on Netflix, but I kind of missed the boat. So there that goes. But whenever that becomes available on something that I have, I'm sure I will watch it. I know that's kind of so and it's very much its own thing, but I, I really am glad that Scream does exist, and that, we have this area to have, social commentary, or, I should say more so, commentary about the horror genre in general, and just picking it apart and turning it on its head and making something fun. And it's a good, slasher to get into. None of the kills are really standout, it's very basic, but if you can get, beyond that, is that it's very interesting stories and kind of cool like Scooby-Doo mysteries to it, and the reveals. Some of them are better than others, but I still think it makes for a fun time. And I mean to rewatch a lot of these movies, like especially like the first one, and probably like four and five, and maybe six. But I've been meaning to give a rewatch because, as I said, I've only watched them one time so far. So I think I'm, more so due, and maybe I will do that in anticipation of the buildup of, the new one, and maybe there were some things I missed, and and it just makes me wonder, where things are going with this exactly. But I think there's a reason why there's so much mystery behind it. So there's a reason why we're 7 movies in. I don't think it's as much of a cash grab as a lot of other franchises are. I think it's still going quite well, but only time will tell with this series, and maybe I'm dead wrong. I guess we'll just have to see. So I plan on seeing it opening weekend. I don't know about you, but let me know in the comments. Are you excited for Scream 7, or could you kind of care less? And are you just going to wait for it to pop up on streaming? Let me know. There's another comedian that I don't think I've mentioned on this podcast yet either. I know I've, talked about Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura and Dave Chappelle, but I don't think I've really mentioned Shane Gillis at all yet. I'm also a massive fan of Shane Gillis, and I don't think I've talked about him yet on this podcast. And he's had some really big stuff going on lately. He seems to be blowing up more and more all the time. I got the opportunity to see him live a couple of years ago, and I had a really good time with it. And I enjoy, both of his specials. Live from Austin on YouTube is really good, and then Beautiful Dogs on Netflix is so good. I probably watched that, 4 or 5 times, and it's a great special. I really enjoy him a lot, and he just feels, so relatable and just like a real guy up there, like something like, like there's a lot of things he says that, just click with my friends and I, and he feels so relatable. Then it's awesome to see him, hosting SNL a couple of times, which is just funny after being, fired from that, then kind of be like, oh, I'm back, by the way. And, and then doing Bud Light commercials and, other, kind of fun projects. But, and also too, it's been awesome to see him, headlining arenas. I think when I saw him, he was kind of first starting to, headline arenas on his own. And, a lot of them he's doing even in the round because, there's so many tickets to sell and the demand is that high. And, I think he just recently, performed a few nights at Madison Square Garden, so that was epic, and I was really glad to see that for him. I just hope he keeps going and keeps, writing funny material. And yeah, it's been awesome. But that being said, there's also an even bigger thing that has happened, or at least has been announced, and that was the announcement of his upcoming show, July 17th at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. That is the football field. That is a football stadium where the Eagles play. And that's a really big moment for anybody, because there's only been a handful of comics that have played stadiums. I'm sure it's going to become more and more of a thing, but it's a tremendous honor. I mean, Kevin Hart played there and he recorded a special, and I think he was really like the first one to do that on his own, as far as I know, or at least more in this modern day. And that's still like probably, I don't know, like, 10, 12 years ago or so. But I'm really glad to see that Shane is getting such a big opportunity and he has such a draw to be able to do that. I know he opened on a couple of stadium shows with, Zach Bryan and got such a huge pop, but it's cool to see him doing it on his own now and that people are coming there for him. And the fact that, too, even during pre-sale, I believe he's, sold like 10,000 tickets, which that would be like, about half of most arenas already. And some arenas like where I saw him, that would have, sold out then, so that was literally the amount of people that was in the arena when I saw him, already right out of the gate. So, I'm really excited to see what, special guests he'll have on that show. I'm blanking on his name now, but there's the Australian comedian that he had open for him and is just, so funny. I think his name is like Donald Forbes McCann or something. I think he just goes by James McCann, I believe. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. But anyway, very funny comedian. But that being said, I'm just glad to see that Shane has, such big opportunities like this and that he's, getting such a draw that he can do, stadiums now. And he's just, kind of becoming the man. And even, some of my friends that aren't as into comedy, they still really love him a lot. Speaking about different things Shane has going on, I really enjoy his show Tires on Netflix. And I liked both seasons a lot. The first and second season, I just kind of binged them all right away. And I was glad with season 2, you could really see an upgrade in quality, that now that it's kind of made in-house with Netflix. And it's just kind of a, workplace comedy, but it's more than that because it's, a lot, darker and goes for it more than things like, Parks and Rec or, The Office. So it kind of, fits in there a little bit, but it's just kind of more out there. And it's very much in the vein of, Shane's material and the type of stories that he would tell. So I really like that a lot, especially in season 3. I was glad that we got, more episodes with that. Like, yes, it's a longer binge that way, but I was just glad that we got more of it. Season 2 that we got, more episodes, that it was better quality content. And Vince Vaughn, my jaw like dropped when I saw that, he was in there in the one episode at the bar at like the, automotive trade show or whatever for like, tires or whatever that was. Anyway, him just sitting at the bar. So it's just so cool to see these, totally different worlds coming together. And it just makes me curious in season 3 of, what guests they're going to get. Because I thought that was awesome. I'm a big Vince Vaughn fan, and it was just so cool to see him and Shane together. Best of both worlds for me. I love stuff like that. And they've started recording, season 3. They're working on it now, currently in Pennsylvania where they shoot. But I wouldn't be surprised if that would be out sometime during this summer again. I know you have take some time to shoot, then to edit and all that. But I could see it having a summer release on Netflix again. So, I'm really anticipating that a lot. And, I'm looking forward to it. Are you hyped for Tires season 3?